All
Okay,
right.
thanks, Rebecca. Please.
Okay. Are you recording?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. As I mentioned, this is the part where I sort of introduced to the Israelis how there are more people living inside this circle than anywhere else in the world outside of it. I don't need to explain that to you. Of course, now we're seeing, 3 out of the world's 10 largest economies based in Asia, but by 2030, that will be 4 out of 5 of the world's largest economies in Asia, including Indonesia, which is something that most Israelis are very unaware of. And as I mentioned, COVID, I think, has highlighted for those who didn't realize it already that what happens in Asia, for better or for worse, really does have an impact on the rest of the world. So at the Israel Asia Center, we're dedicated to informing, empowering, and connecting the Israel Asia leaders of tomorrow. And it's not just about strengthening Israel's relations with different countries in Asia, which for us as a country is critically important to our future security and also future economic growth. It's also about building a better and more sustainable future in the Asian century, and seeing Israel as an incubator for developing creative solutions to global challenges. And increasingly, companies and government around the world are seeing the same too. And over the last few years, multinationals, about 500 multinationals, have set up their R&D and innovation centers in Israel precisely to tap into Israel's entrepreneurial spirit, innovation, and technology. Israel, of course, is known as a startup nation, and it's known as a global leader in innovation. That's not something I think that's widely known in Indonesia. Most people I speak to in Indonesia, when they think of Israel, they think of the conflict and what they see in the news, and of course, the reality is very different. And most Israelis aren't aware of the fact that Indonesia is tapped to be the world's 5th largest economy by 2030. As I mentioned before, Israel is a global leader in innovation, but it's a very small market. It's a country of just 9 million people. And what it means is that Israeli companies need to be global from day one. What they are unaware of is the fact that Indonesia is a G20 country. It's a market of 270 million people. And right now there's tremendous untapped potential in terms of how the two countries can work together. And I think that some of the greatest synergies, and I think that not only these, but certainly include healthcare, food security, education, sustainable urban development, finance and financial inclusion, and many areas in which Israel has not just technologies, but expertise to share through things that we've also been through. And I think there's a lot Indonesia can bring to the table as well to Israel, also in terms of building large companies, which Israel's great at building startups, not so great at growing those startups into larger companies. Something that Indonesia, as you know, has a great deal of experience in. So despite the fact that there are no diplomatic ties between Israel and Indonesia, I think that there is a lot, as you mentioned before, happening under the radar. We're already seeing in a normal year 50,000 Indonesians coming to Israel as tourists, many on pilgrimages to Israel. There are Israeli businesses that are operating quietly in Indonesia, usually via Singapore, and we are seeing as well a select number of Indonesian business people investing in Israeli technologies, but it's still very kind of, I'd say, not just under the radar. The activity is relatively small in terms of where the potential lies. So at the moment, the bilateral trade between the two countries is only about $500 million a year. And most of that is actually purchases by Israel of Indonesian products, which surprised me when I first heard about it, because I thought it would be the other way around. So there's somewhat of an imbalance there, but it's also a very low number. And what we've been seeing, especially since the normalization of ties between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain, and more talks of more Muslim countries signing peace agreements with Israel. Of course, there are already about at least a dozen Muslim countries that have peace agreements and full diplomatic ties with Israel. We're seeing much more interest from Indonesia to say, well, if they can do it, why can't we? And of course, Indonesia's a democracy, different circumstances, but even under the radar, even very quietly, there's a tremendous amount that we can be doing. And I think there's so many synergies that can be tapped into that can help both countries to prosper. And in terms of people-to-people business relations, totally on the economic front, in education, and different areas of technology and other fields. For a long time now, we have wanted to develop Israel-Indonesia specific programs. And I think that COVID almost creates that opportunity to do so. It really, I think with everybody moving online, it really breaks down barriers. And I think that, at a time when we're facing unprecedented challenges, where every country is, I think this is really an opportunity to really join forces and to see how we can help each other. It's really an opportunity and a time to build bridges. A little bit more about the Israel Asia Center. So we're a not-for-profit organization. We've been running for the past 9 years and been running programs for 9 of those. We're based here in Jerusalem, and we run 2 different kinds of programs. Firstly, leadership programs focused on building future leaders in Israel-Asia relations in key influencer fields, whether it's in business, in media, technology, government, and many other fields, and then also in public education and thought leadership programs that are aimed at creating more Asia engaged and Asia informed leading Israeli decision makers and opinion shapers. So on that front, and you can actually see Ambassador Bilahari here at an event of ours. You can we run different kinds of briefings and roundtables for members of parliament, for government officials, for business leaders, heads of think tanks and universities and journalists and so on, to really delve into different trends and developments in Asia, what we can learn from best practices from different countries in Asia, especially countries like Singapore, for example, and how we can apply those to challenges that we're facing, and also what value we can bring to the table as well, and where those opportunities for co-innovation and partnership building lie. This is just a view of one of our programs we've been running for the past 9 years. It's called the Israel Asia Leaders Fellowship. And it's an 8-month part-time leadership program here in Israel for Asian and Israeli students and young professionals. It's a program that provides them with the high-level contacts, the skills, the support networks to develop high-level partnerships between Israel and different countries in Asia in their respective fields. So over the past 9 years, we've put almost 100 young leaders through the program from 14 different countries, including Singapore and Indonesia. And the alumni of that program have secured about $200 million of investment from Asia in the Israeli economy, both in terms of direct sales of Israeli products to Asia and investments from Asia in Israeli companies, as well as setting up a range of Israel-Asia ventures, Israel-Asia bridge building initiatives, publishing books about Israel in Asian languages, and the list goes on. But I feel that despite the impact, I think there's also ways that we can scale this up. And we do also run other leadership programs as well, tailor-made programs for universities, organizations, companies, but also and also some programs. For example, a program that it's a program for next generation leaders of Asian family businesses focused on disrupting traditional industries. In terms of our networks, we really work across the spectrum. So we work with business leaders, investors, with consulting firms, universities, think tanks, media, with government, both here and with government representatives and ambassadors from Asia, as well as thought leaders, tech entrepreneurs, and so on. And I think COVID is really a defining turning point. It's an opportunity to rethink the global landscape, to rethink how we work together, especially across borders and with countries that we don't have diplomatic ties with. And I think one of the big takeaways from COVID is that we need to be doing things differently. We need to be reprioritizing and almost choosing the challenges that really need solving and are worthwhile solving to create a world that's more sustainable. And of course, we're seeing how industries and markets and consumer behavior is shifting. And I think there are really opportunities here for carving out new channels for collaboration. So on that note, we've partnered with an organization called Startup Nation Central. Startup Nation Central, have you heard of the book Startup Nation?
Not yet.
Okay, so the book Startup Nation, it was written about 10 years ago by soul singer Dan Senor. It's an international bestseller, including in Singapore. It's also translated into Bahasa Indonesia. And it basically asks the question, how is it that Israel's such a small country, but we have more startups per capita than any other country in the world? What is it about this country that's produced so many world-leading technologies and cutting-edge innovation? And based on the book, this organization, Startup Nation Central, was set up. It's a very large, it's an organization of about 70 people here in Israel, and it's headed by the former head of Israel's National Economic Council, Eugene Kandel. And what they do is, first of all, they've created this incredible, very accessible database of the approximately 10,000 players in the Israeli innovation ecosystem, from startups to VC funds to multinationals who set up innovation centers in Israel. They produce reports on emerging tech sectors, and they also work closely on what they call engagements with companies, governments, and NGOs from around the world that come to them with a specific problem, and they help them to map out a solution via the Israeli innovation ecosystem. We're working with them on a series of new, specifically online leadership programs that are all country focused. And the first program that we're very excited to launch is the Israel-Indonesia Futures program. And this is a program that will engage the rising stars and the up-and-coming leaders from Israel and Indonesia to address emerging challenges in the post-COVID era in areas such as healthcare, in education and talent creation, in food security, in financial inclusion, and also urban environment. It's going to be a 12-week program running from January to March of 2021 with 20 participants from Israel and from Indonesia. Okay, so there hasn't been any other program like this in the past. It's really going to be a pioneering program, which we're really excited about, to essentially create those working relationships and that partnership building between the future leaders of Israel and Indonesia. And the kind of people that we're targeting for this program are not students. that people in their 20s and 30s who already can bring with them a certain level of expertise, of know-how, of networks to the table from different sectors. So they could be startup, tech, social entrepreneurs. They might be consulting, working for consulting companies or organizations like the World Bank or Asian Development Bank. They could be heading innovation hubs or managers in universities or advisors to government officials and so on. Okay, so the team of 20 people will be split into 5 teams of 4 people, 2 Israelis and 2 Indonesians on each team. Each team will be assigned a specific challenge that they'll have to develop a solution to by the end of the program. And those challenges will be set by our challenge partners and corporate sponsors. And they'll be the ones to actually carry out the solution or implement the solution at the end of the program. Based on the challenges that our challenge partners are setting and the criteria that they put in place, we're actually going to be recruiting the right candidates to the program itself from both Israel and Indonesia to create those customized consulting teams or thinking groups that bring together the right combination of skills, expertise, know-how from both Israel and Indonesia, essentially combining those strengths of both countries to work together on developing solutions to those particular challenges. And they could be challenges that those companies or organizations are facing themselves, or something that they want to lead in the ecosystem in which they're operating. Each team will receive mentors from both countries, in both Israel and Indonesia, and this will be complemented by online programming with interactive seminars with high-level guest speakers from both countries that really delve into the economies, the cultures, and the innovation ecosystems of both Israel and Indonesia, exploring the existing and potential trade and economic relations between the 2 countries. And really looking at where those next challenges lie that face both Israel and Indonesia, especially post-COVID, and where those opportunities lie for co-innovation and partnership building. And of course, looking at those sort of shifting markets and where also, the investment opportunities, and there'll also be skill building workshops as well in areas such as leadership skills, especially leadership in times of crisis such as this, and how to recognize those silver linings and it's culturally specific networking, stakeholder engagement, creative and innovative thinking. And then after the program, there'll be ongoing engagements, networking opportunities, and also support as well through micro grants after the program. And we see this as just a really exciting opportunity to create a safe space. We understand that not everybody wants to be open about their relationship between Israel and Indonesia. There are sensitivities involved. We're creating a safe space for this partnership building, for this networking, and really to create those people-to-people relationships and business opportunities between our 2 countries. And we're really excited about it. We have some pretty high-level people involved in this already. And something that I wanted to talk to you about is, we have a room on the program for 1 more challenge partner. And it's something that I thought that there could be potential to discuss this with you, or you might have ideas among your members of a company or organization that might be interested in coming on board as one of our challenge partners, setting a challenge and really sponsoring a team on the program who will recruit and assign to work with them on addressing this particular challenge. And we think this is an incredible opportunity to really tap into the potential.
Hi, Rebecca. Well, it's interesting for the program. Actually, I want to explore more detail about the program in the Indonesia and Singapore relationship, especially for Israel as a startup nation. So I think a lot of area I I'm interested to explore. Maybe I want to highlight about the Israel Asia Center for Startup Nation Central for Indonesia Future Program. How many people from Indonesia you are looking, or what is the criteria of this event?
Am I still being recorded?
Oh, maybe I stop the recorded.
Okay.